Hey everybody, we're here. We're going to talk Rogue One. It's our spoiler cast. Eric Goldman, Joshua Yale, I'm Ahmad Childress. We're going to just jump right into it. Hopefully you've seen the movie already. If you have not, come back later. Don't watch this video until after you've seen the movie. We're going to cover it all. Beginning, ending, middle, the whole thing. So here's where I want to start off. First of all, and I'm going to lead with Joshua on this one. What did you think of the new characters? Do you feel like these are iconic Star Wars characters that will exist and stand the test of time, or do you think these are people we'll never hear of again?
It always felt like they were a very one-dimensional means to an end. I wasn't really into any character except K2SO. Alan Tudyk was just so funny. Every line was hilarious. Ironically, him being a droid, he was the only one who felt alive and real and kind of like fleshed out to me with like an actual personality. The other ones were like okay. I liked Chirrut and Baze, was it?
Yeah.
They were cool, but again, we didn't like dig into them enough for me to like truly, really care about them. And Jyn, even though she's the main character of the movie, I felt like we didn't really get to know her enough to actually like truly care about her. So I was kind of meh on the characters.
Baze and Chirrut probably had, out of the entire cast, probably the best chemistry between the two of them that you can actually see on screen, where you're like, okay, these characters definitely have a connection. You feel that there's a backstory, even if you only get a tiny snippet of it.
Yeah, I see Eric getting dark Sith eyes at me over there. He wants to respond.
Eric's trying to force make fun of you.
So I love this movie. I don't want to say like, oh, every character is going to be everyone's favorite, because I think it's a mixed bag. And some do work better than others. I did really like Jyn. I didn't like. I won't say like she's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, but I did like her. I was invested in her. I thought that she worked very well as sort of the protagonist of this movie. And of the group, then there were some people more than others. I think Chirrut, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing right, does stand out to me. We'll talk more later about sort of what he adds to the mythos, but I think there's a lot of coolness there. Donnie Yen's performance is great. There's just an attitude the character has, and I think when you're talking about Star Wars and when people like Darth Maul and Boba Fett can become iconic with much less than that, I think he's going to become pretty iconic. And I loved K2SO, who's just definitely a standout character. It is, again, a mixed bag. Like Bodhi, for instance, I needed more. I thought that's the character that stands out the most to me. Is I needed more of his backstory, because a Imperial pilot who's decided to betray the Empire is a big deal, and he has that one little interaction where he talks about Galen told me this is how I could set things right. But still, I don't think that's enough to be like, so I betrayed the Empire and took off and betrayed and risked my life. I just felt like we needed more.
We definitely needed to find out what the inciting incident was for him to get there.
Yeah.
We've seen it in the Lost Stars book, where one of the characters is a TIE fighter pilot and he has to shoot on civilians, and he's like, hey, I can't do this.
Yeah.
We don't get any of that from Bodhi.
He's just like, Galen sure is a swell guy.
Yeah.
He is very charismatic and convincing.
Yeah, so there's, and then Cassian, I liked Diego Luna's performance, and I liked what the character introduced, because I liked that in the movie in general was much more about the gray area, and that the rebels weren't just good guys, and that he was, just kills a guy in the first time we meet him. I do think that there could have been a little more even beyond that than what we got, but it worked for me. So, again, it's not like I don't want to be like, these are my new favorite Star Wars characters, but I think, a good 3 of 4 of them I really liked, and the rest, I will probably look to books to strengthen stuff that I do think the movie could have given more info on.
It definitely was interesting that the prequels gave us a different look at the Jedi, where you're like, oh, they're not these mythic people, they're actually very, very flawed. And now we get the same kind of look back at the rebels, and you're like, oh, they're kind of terrible-ish in some ways. I mean, they're not these shining examples of, virtue and everything.
Yeah.
Well, what's also interesting, it would be interesting to see some of these characters. It'd be nice to see Jyn in her adventures with Saw when she was younger, or Andor while he's doing his other rebel spying stuff, and kind of what brought him there. Because obviously he's wrestling with kind of what he's become there.
Mm-hmm. And what really didn't work for me about Jyn, the more I think about it, was I feel like she was missing sort of a key scene after she saw, and remember we're talking full spoilers here, after she saw her father die, and then when she made that sort of rousing speech to the table of the rebels meeting, of just rebellions are built on hope. It's like, but how did you get from this low point to this high point. Like it felt like unearned and sort of like she wasn't speaking like passionately based on what had happened to her. It just seemed more like now they wrote this speech for me, and I must say it. Like it didn't quite all gel together for me. So I thought if they had this maybe one extra scene of where she talked with somebody or something and sort of expressed how my father kind of gave me this last mission to do, and that I need to convince these rebels to go on just really off of his word, my word, because I lost the recording, and make this happen, but I didn't really feel like that was there.
I had to think about this a lot because I understood what you're saying, but I think it's all there. I do agree with you. It probably could have used like one extra scene, but I do think it's all laid out enough for me, in so much as it's said quickly, but it's like she was already a soldier for Saw until she was 16, and then she was so disillusioned. She watched, she finds out, she gets the message from her father, which is her big sort of emotional scene. She falls to her knees. Then she's reunited. He dies. So I think it's all there. I agree with you. It's like there could have been probably one more scene before she makes that speech that kind of it brings it together.
It definitely is there, especially where she's probably not thinking very highly of her father. She knows he's working for the Empire. Mm-hmm. She's probably feeling a little abandoned, no matter how they were separated. But finding out that he's actually been working for them, I feel it was the inciting incident. They just didn't play it up.
Yeah.
It was. I think the inciting incident was just there. They just probably under dramatized it. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's just talk about the ending. Let's talk about where the ending of the film brought all of these characters and kind of what that meant for the film. And I'll lead with Eric on this one.
So yeah, once again, full spoilers. The ending of Rogue One. I was, impressed that they went for it and that they all died. It was certainly a movie going in. I don't think anyone thought they're all going to make it out. It almost was implicit that this would be a high body count movie, just based on the nature of the story, the fact that we never heard about these characters in the original trilogy. But I kind of thought like someone will make it out. I actually thought it was Cassian when Krennic shoots him, because I'm like, he's not dead. So I had this idea that Jyn was going to die, but that Cassian might be the one to make it out. But then they all did, and I mean, I just kind of give them kudos for this is a Star Wars movie. And so that's a pretty sort of gutsy way to go, to just be like, and I think it does reflect the kind of movie it is, which is much more looking at like the war side of Star Wars, and that there is this sacrifice and these casualties. And obviously we've had death in Star Wars, but
not at this scale.
Not at this scale, and not in this sort of like in the trenches level. So I thought it was impactful, and I thought that, we were saying some of the characters might have worked better than others, but I do think that most of those deaths played pretty well, as far as like the sacrifice and the idea that like the idea of giving your all, but still for a good cause, and the fact that they were accomplishing their goal, I thought really worked.
Well, before I jump to Joshua on this, I think one thing that they made kind of clear in the way that everybody passed in the film was everybody seemed very accepting of their fate in that movie. From Saw to Chirrut, everybody was just like, okay, this is my time. All right, we're good here. Nothing was super abrupt. I think everybody just was like, I'm dedicated to the mission, and I am totally aware of the consequences of this type of mission. Right. But what did you think?
Yeah, I thought, kind of like Eric was saying, of just that I was surprised, because even just from a business standpoint, it's like, okay, we're gonna we're spending a lot of time and money and planning
merchandise.
to make Rogue One happen. And then to not leave really anyone available for a spin-off, because we know that's interconnected cinematic universes are like all the things, right? And we know that, like for the Han Solo movie that's rumored to actually be a trilogy, right? So we know all the characters aren't going to die at the end of that one except Han Solo and Chewie, right? But for something like this, it was so weird to see them all just die. And like I was joking earlier that maybe Baze could have like rolled away at the last second and survived his grenade blast, but no, really they all are like definitively dead. So that's weird from like a business point of view, that they killed all these what if people really liked Jyn or Cassian, and they want more, but you can't have it. So I think that actually makes it a stronger movie in the end, for all the things I don't like about it. Which I do like some things about it. I feel like that makes
stakes.
I would have liked maybe someone to be like really scared of dying. It would have like kind of what you were saying. Maybe some people, not everyone is so committed to the cause that they're ready to die. just sort of like to show like the different shades of war and how people approach. But I also really, really enjoyed the idea that this movie, more than any of the Star Wars movies, actually, they felt like rebels. In fact, they are rebels of the Rebel Alliance, right? Yeah. And they have to kind of show them like this is what the cause really is, and the other rebels sort of snap out of it, and then they come and help in the end. But they are like literally a small group of people going against authority into a mission where no one is coming out alive. Like that is the epitome of the rebels. Like, and essentially we don't hear about them in the other movies. Like they're wiped off the map and sort of removed from history in a way. So I thought that was actually a really strong point that they ended on such a grim note.
Yeah, they're actually almost an insurgent group within the rebels. As much as Saw kind of fills that role, Jen kind of takes that mantle as like, hey, you know what? We're the establishment of the Rebel Alliance is not moving fast enough for us. We think we can help. We're just going to jump in. You guys figure it out. Send X-wings or don't. You know.
I think they did a very good job with that ending because it was tricky, because they didn't want people to leave the theater depressed, right? And I don't think you do. Now, of course, we literally know that this mission is going to be successful because we have a movie that shows them blowing up the Death Star. So we know they didn't die in vain.
Spoiler.
But also, sorry, oh my God, if you haven't seen episode 4. But more importantly, it's like that the way the movie works, I mean, that last half hour is so impressive. I think it just builds and builds and builds. And so even though everyone's dying, you're still feeling momentum. It's not just like, and then they died, and it's somber.
Yeah.
There's still, because then it's still like, okay, now they beamed the plans out, and what's going on, and getting it off, and that Vader sequence, which is amazing. So it's very impressive, I think, to me that last act works so well as far as both being real stakes, real sacrifice, but also still kind of dare I say it, giving you hope, but having optimism, having and leaving on like still a thrill.
You're right. Every character died, sort of completing a different piece of the puzzle to help get those plans out. Like Bodhi connected the cable, and Chirrut did the master switch.
It was the sci-fi Dirty Dozen movie. For in so many different ways.
Yeah. Although I will say just one final thing, as the sort of the nuclear blast was going off and he had
the slow-moving nuclear blast.
Yeah, really slow. Jin and Cassian were there. I wanted that to be like, I don't know, to have more impact on me, but I guess they didn't. Those characters didn't really like capture me. That I wasn't really. I thought I'd be a lot more sad when they were going out. And I think it was great that they didn't kiss or anything.
Yeah, it was
that.
Not. It was like don't do the Captain America kissing Peggy.
I think it was nice for Cassian to remind her of your father would be so proud. But it also rang a little too cheesy. I think they could have maybe done a different bit of dialogue there. I don't know. I wonder if that was also reshot. And maybe
it was the best he could think of. As they're about to die.
Yeah, but that was
your
what
pops
was
most proud of you.
Yeah, that wasn't what was most important to her from the beginning to end of the movie. So. It's not so bad, but it was a little cheesy, and I kind of wish they did another pass at the dialogue on that.
It reminded me of the nuclear blast scene from Watchmen a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It did work. It's one of those things where it's just kind of going back to what I said about how I am with her sort of switch to being like a full-fledged rebel, even though I could have used a little more. I guess it's the same way for me with their final moment, because it worked for me, but I also think, it could have worked even better, slightly different. Like there's something where they could have been even
a tiny
more.
bit of impact.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump to the next topic, and we can just talk about this briefly. This is really the first Star Wars movie we've seen that doesn't have any Jedi in it.
Yeah.
With the exception of The Force Awakens, it had very little, small amounts of Luke, but really the Jedi do not have a significant presence in the form of people. The Force is a bigger player in this. What do you feel about that?
No, I thought it worked really well. I mean, of course, it's interesting because by going to Jeddah, and then of course by both Chirrut, I keep hoping I'm hitting his name right, and Baze to a lesser extent because he's also supposed to be a guardian of the wills. You're still getting this idea of like the aftermath of the Jedi being gone, and it's still like the remnants of it. But this movie did have going into it, that was kind of a big question. Is look, people love their lightsabers, right? They love their lightsaber fights, and this was a movie that was not going to include that. Yeah, Vader does have a lightsaber and he uses it, but
we'll talk about that later.
There was no lightsaber fight in this movie, right? The first Star Wars movie to not have a lightsaber fight.
Yeah,
and
that's actually a great point.
I think it still worked very well, and the idea of the Force has a true religion. I thought was used very well, especially with Chirrut and
Lyra Ursa as well.
Yes, and so that belief in it and that faith in it, it's a delicate thing, but I think it completely works within the context of this movie, and it did make me hopeful going forward for these other Star Wars story spin-offs to say, okay, yeah, we can see Star Wars movies without a lightsaber fight, and it still really works,
Yeah, and you can tell the people of Jedi looked at the Force the way that Qui-Gon Jinn looked at Jin. Looked at the Force differently from most of the other characters we were used to. That they kind of look at it almost as it's philosophy. It's a slightly different than just it's a force to connect.
I thought that was actually a very smart element of the movie in that, because in A New Hope we hear people who aren't Jedi or anything say like, "Oh, may the Force be with you," and that, just sort of as a background like flavoring. But this really showed that like at work, and how putting the kyber crystal around Jin's necklace. At first, I almost thought like, oh, that's going to be some sort of like plot point later. Like they'll need that, but it's like no, it really was just like a religious.
When she builds her lightsaber.
Yeah. Without doing anything, and it comes together, and it's like, oh, I knew it.
You stuck one in.
Yeah, it's Rey's mom. But no, I thought it was really nice that the necklace was really just a religious memento. Like someone might wear like the sign of the cross around their neck. Like this was that for them. And I liked how, even though they weren't Jedi, they weren't Force sensitive. Like Chirrut could sense it, but he couldn't wield it.
Yeah.
And it seemed like Jin as well was believed in the Force, but she could not channel it in any way. But yet when they were going through that portal,
the checkpoint.
Sorry?
The checkpoint.
Yeah, the checkpoint.
Yeah.
And she just grabs her necklace and like you can see it's kind of like saying a prayer of hoping they get through.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the Force worked for them, but they weren't using the Force. Same thing with Chirrut when he did his little walk to the Master Switch. And again, he wasn't doing anything, but I think the Force was with him. And I thought those were really powerful moments that I thought was pretty cool without them actually being Jedi.
Yeah.
Which is the exact words that came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
The Force is with me.
But it also ties into Obi-Wan, like the way we all learned about the Force in the original Star Wars movie, Episode 4, is Obi-Wan saying, it flows through all living things.
Yeah.
But then we just see Jedi do cool stuff. So this was more of the idea of like, the Force says, something that exists for everyone. It's just that Jedi can wield it in different ways.
Okay, so now I'm going to get to the really fun part of this. We're going to talk about the fan service. We're going to talk about all of the little elements that tied to other Star Wars properties and what we liked or didn't like about them. I'm going to go with Eric.
Yep.
To start.
I think 90% of it worked really well. There were way more cameos than I expected, but look, I will say every one of them, when I first saw them happen, put a grin on my face. A couple afterwards.
What was your favorite?
Maybe Golden Red Leader. As far as just because I was like, oh, what? Of course, and that's the thing that made most of the cameos work so well, is that they made sense for that they would be there, right? The one that really pops out to me is like complete, like, okay, this is pushing it, is I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce these names right, Dr. Evazin and Ponda Baba. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the fact that like that
weirdos from the cantina,
the two guys from the cantina,
who got their arm chopped off.
Just because that's more of a small universe thing. Like, oh, they're on Jedi. I guess they're about to fly to Tatooine.
Yeah, I was gonna say they had to leave that day.
Yes,
hey, we got a flight to catch.
That one sticks out to me. Because everyone else, like even 3PO and R2, which you didn't need it, but they would be there.
It's good that they're. I do like. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that C-3PO and R2-D2 are part of the connective tissue of these films.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to work for the Han Solo film, but I like that they're still kind of even if they're not the lead characters, they're still the constants in the series.
The only characters in every single Star Wars movie. Still.
Yeah. And I really like them.
But then just like look, we knew already Mon Mothma and Bail Organa were there, but it was just cool to like see all those ties. And then, I really loved the idea of both seeing Gold Leader and Red Leader, which was used from footage from 40 years ago.
Which looked amazing.
It was great. And then even the fact, Red 5 dies during the fight, and that's Luke's call sign. So it's like, oh, they have an opening, and a few days later, they're going to meet Luke and be like, oh, you could be Red 5. We lost that guy. So, but it worked, so I think... almost all of the fan service, and it was fan service, but it was very well done, and for the most part made sense.
Okay, so I want your opinion. We'll talk about fan service around a particular tie in a little bit, but go ahead and jump in.
No, yeah. I thought the movie's strongest point was its fan service in a lot of ways. I thought that really just whenever the fan service happened, the crowd cheered and like went wild, like the red leader, gold leader thing. I was like, oh my god! And it was so great seeing it with a crowd that just loved Star Wars. Part of me wonders if like the more casual people who don't like Star Wars like we do, how they take that. Like when Bail Organa is like talking about like the Jedi friend, you know. Do other people pick up on that? Do they get that little squeal of glee, like we do? I don't know. But a lot of it was just really well done and not like too much, but touches of sort of everything you love without overdoing it. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really smart. Does Darth Vader whipping out the lightsaber
I was going to say, I feel like that
is
the biggest piece of fan service in the entire film.
And that worked too, just because I think we've never had a modern day movie where he was Darth Vader and got to make use of full special effects and do all these crazy things. It's like a horror movie. It's black. The saber turns on, blocks everything. Force chokes, slams them all across, takes their weapons, cuts through them all, goes through the door.
It was like we're used to seeing Vader as the commander of Imperial forces, Vader directing things, Vader yelling at people, Vader killing subordinates. This was Vader fighting rebels in a way that we have never even seen any glimpse of before.
Yeah, I said there's some similar stuff in the book, Lords of the Sith, that reading it, I was like, oh, this is thrilling. This would be amazing in a movie. And so to actually see it happen in a movie, that was pretty incredible. And just because, bringing Darth Vader back at all, it's both exciting but a little risky. Are you going to dilute him more? But then instead of, I think this is a scary Vader we've never seen before in a movie. So
this is the Jason Voorhees Darth Vader in space. The minute you hear the sound, you hear him breathe, and you see the lightsaber, you're like, uh-oh.
Like,
those poor white helmeted bastards.
He's going to cut those little vests off.
But no, it was super cool. And even just while we're talking about Darth Vader, their use of Vader I thought was so well done. Very sparingly of just the one scene, and we get to see Vader's castle, vast castle.
That was awesome.
And then sort of him in his chamber, and he has the guards watching over him. And then when
just enough to let us speculate more about what's happening there.
You can't quite see him. And then when he talks to Krennic, I was surprised they actually created another quotable, sort of iconic Vader line with "careful not to choke on your aspirations." And I was like, oh yeah!
I've seen some people debate that. Some people don't like that he's punny there, but I thought it worked.
He's punny in general in other places.
Vader, he seemed to just take such sadistic joy in saying it while choking him that I just thought it worked so well. James Earl Jones delivering that line is so deep and makes your rib cage rattle because the theater speakers are so loud. And I was like, I'm there, I'm down. I'm gonna be saying that to people, and I'm gonna go like this.
And it's funny because we all joked about what the hell is he doing in that picture.
Yeah,
that's
now we know. Yeah. It was also nice seeing the Imperial Guard, although I do feel like they were misplaced on Bass Castle. I'm like, should have been stormtroopers in there, but then maybe they're there to keep Vader's secrets.
Yeah, that's EU stuff though, where he had his own stormtrooper battalion, and now I guess he just borrows Imperial guards when he's taking a bath back to back.
I figure he'd have some 501st guys there, but whatever. Let's talk about the pros and cons of using this film to kind of set up A New Hope, and this movie is it's pretty much figuratively the first two paragraphs of the opening crawl.
Yeah.
They did exactly what happens there. Joshua, what do you think about using this film as a setup to A New Hope?
I thought it was cool to get the backstory of the opening crawl and show sort of really what they were talking about. And it's a lot more fractured that you would have thought of that they we know that there's plans. Although, sorry, now I have to spin off of what I was just saying, because it's first of all funny that they sort of do the retroactive, they retconned the Death Star weakness. Because people would always say, oh, why would they build the Death Star when knowing one little shoot into an exhaust port 2 meters wide could blow it up, but it turns out it wasn't on purpose. It was all built into it. I thought that was sort of a funny scene where he's Galen's explaining that. So to get that, and to get that this mission of just these people who really came together at the last second to do something right in defiance of the actual rebellion. I thought that was crazy. So to get like the backstory to the backstory was crazy. But as far as I don't feel like they like this Rogue One effectively like docked with a New Hope seamlessly. And I say that because now all the conversations at the start of New Hope, I went back and watched it, don't make perfect sense anymore. Because when Vader boards the ship, he has this. He
looks very annoyed.
Rebels and Princess Leia sort of throw up this front to where they're like, "Oh, we're just on a diplomatic mission. We're not doing anything wrong here." And Vader's like, "No, I know some transmissions were beamed aboard this vessel, and you're all lying." So the thing is, that doesn't hold up. If he just saw them with his own eyes, he was literally standing in space in the docking port watching them escape. They escaped a large-scale battle. Like, that's crazy. And it does say that in the opening crawl, so they just won their first major victory as of the Emperor against the Empire. Now
we know what that victory is.
But it doesn't quite fit to why they would be putting up this farce, like trying to explain.
Except for stalling, you know.
I guess so, but and now it changed. I guess it kind of works, but it changes the tone of it. Of like Darth Vader, like seeing through them. It's like them being like, "Of course we didn't just steal these plans." Like, "Yes, you did. I just saw you." So it changes the context of it. It doesn't work perfectly for me. Ask these two. Like
this has been the big conversation.
I've been like obsessed about it. I'm trying to like make it work.
Darth Vader was totally the dad catching his kid doing something wrong, and Leia's like, "No, we didn't do anything there. Get the hands off." We're totally fine.
I agree with you. Like, it doesn't fit seamlessly because it does take a little work on our part, the viewer, to make it fit. But yeah, it doesn't bother me. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, they're, she was always stalling, but now it's even more kind of a like, this is ridiculous. But it's okay for me because I will say that most of the movie, I was very pleasantly surprised how much it did work as a prequel to A New Hope. And yeah, it's kind of that fine line, right? When you're it can't help but be almost cutesy when you're doing that many like direct setups. But I thought they worked. Like, I loved that Galen set up like the way that Luke blows up the Death Star, just because it does kind of answer one joking fan complaint for many years, but also it helps give that more weight because it helps the Rogue One. Like, now when you watch Luke blow up the Death Star, it's like, oh, because of Galen Erso and his daughter. Like, it helps, add to what they did and what they accomplished as characters. And we were talking about with these characters, and that doesn't mean you still think that they're great, exciting characters.
It gives them historical importance.
It gives them importance. Yeah, it gives them, like, in the mythos, what they did, kind of carries on.
These are the future heroes of the rebellion.
Right. Like, and you get the idea that there's, somewhere there's like a plaque with their names on it.
Well, it's the CIA wall with the stars and no names. And
I actually would have worked, now I think about it, that the bridge between the two movies would have worked a little better if Vader didn't see that ship leave, but then we would have gotten that awesome like Vader scene. Right. But if he didn't see it leave, then he wouldn't have known which ship to go after, and then we kind of assume sometime after this battle, he's just tracking down, trying to find out where it went, and he tracks down this ship.
Yeah.
And then he finds the ship, and he's like, well, this must be it, and he doesn't quite know, right? But then he figures it out. I think then it would be okay, but the way that it's not. But then
this
again,
really keeps Joshua up.
and what
I can't sleep because of this. But I'll just stop complaining, and I'll be grateful for the Vader scene.
And what we learned from the director recently is that it is a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
We got that confirmed that this
it's
takes
like
place.
Minutes.
Yeah, this is within minutes to an hour between the ending of Rogue One and the beginning of A New Hope. So
Right.
That makes sense. Let's jump over to, and we're going to talk about the use of some CG characters. Again, total spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the movie, if you've been watching this far, we're getting into some of the bigger kind of spoilery stuff, as if the rest wasn't. But there are two CG characters in this film. One of them is a smaller character than the other.
Well, we should say CG recreation, since KTSO is also a CG character.
Yes, this is true. But a CG recreation of Grand Moff Tarkin. So what did you feel about not just the performance, but did you feel that it was necessary?
It was so this is my biggest complaint about the movie. I love the movie, but my biggest criticism would be that the digital recreation of Peter Cushing, not just Grand Moff Tarkin, of Peter Cushing, didn't really work. And it was, I mean, it was a big swing, and I think it was kind of the riskiest thing they tried, and it's one of those things where you're like, well, that's pretty good, but it's not there yet. Maybe in 5 to 10 years it will be. I can't, the uncanny valley thing is happening. I'm looking at him, and it's like, that's a cartoon. Like, it's just, he's not, if I honestly believe if I'd never seen the original Star Wars, if I didn't know Peter Cushing's an actor who died 22 years ago, I'd be like, what's up with that guy's face? Like, did they digitally, something alter something? Because there's just something off when you're watching him.
There was a little extra color in there. There was there was more detail than it felt like needed to be.
Yeah.
Considering the way that they did it in Revenge of the Sith, where they took a very long shot.
Yeah.
They use an actor. They use probably some prosthetics to kind of.
Yeah, they
and
did.
you saw it from pretty far away. You're like, oh, okay, that's clearly Tarkin. This was a little bit different, and to me, it reminded me of Flynn at the beginning of Tron Legacy, where you have a bunch of shots of him talking to his son, and you're like, oh, okay, he looks like young Jeff Bridges, and oh, you can't see his face, it's obscured by part of the room, and then they put him right in your face, and you're like, oh, that's not a human
That's the
person.
thing, they kept putting Tarkin in our faces, and
Yeah.
right dead center, and close-ups and stuff, and it's like...
Inviting our critique.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people have said this, is that when they first show him and he's talking, you just see his reflection off the window, and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be so artful and tasteful if we just saw that, and he was just in this one scene. But he had a ton of scenes. In fact, I feel like he almost had more scenes than Krennic, to Krennic's detriment. Like, we didn't get enough Krennic, I feel like, because I think they were kind of like, I thought they got a little cocky. They're like, oh, we're gonna recreate him because we're gonna
such an iconic.
Yeah, we're so good at this that we're gonna recreate this and people are gonna love it. And they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I feel like, look, I do think putting Tarkin in the movie makes sense story-wise. Him not being in it at all would be kind of
misstep.
Strange, right? But yeah, you saw that first scene when he's looking at the reflection, and then he turns around, and then you're like, whoa, that doesn't work. But I'm like, yeah, I felt like they could have just show him in the reflection, have him in the movie less.
Dimly lit
a couple other times. I totally get wanting to have him be, you may fire when ready, but that could either be from behind or using footage from 40 years ago. Instead he's like on camera a lot, and it's a very strange thing that it does take you out of the movie almost every single time, because it's like fully lit, and it's like Polar Express character is just sort of in the middle of this movie.
Let's talk about the other CG recreation, young Leia. What'd you think?
That one was somehow even worse, even though it was on screen for like 3 seconds. I just didn't quite. It actually made me a little uncomfortable, and I was like, oh, I was cool when you see it from behind.
Or the side. The side shot was fine.
And you kind of hope, wouldn't that be nice if they just stopped there?
That's why they covered her head, so they don't have to show all of her face.
She's like, thank you, just hand it to me.
Yeah.
I was talking about this earlier today. It's like, if when she turns her head first and she's got the hood, so you're only seeing part of her face, and if that had been if she had said hope,
which was a great tie-in to
I get it, yeah. But it's the same thing with Tarkin. It's almost like, it almost felt like, let's go for it. But no, she turns, she walks right up to the camera, shot of her, and she speaks, and you're like, whoa, that's weird.
You got that like lifeless CGI eyes, that have come a long way,
with
but you still, it's like, doesn't quite work.
Facial texture that looks spongy. It felt like she was putting her face out almost like the Abyss aliens, the water aliens, like, right, like, okay, we get it.
So it was unfortunate. It's funny because, again, I think like the last half hour of this movie is amazing, and I love the ending, but it's funny that the final beat of the movie is on this weird moment because of this digital recreation that just doesn't quite work.
Whereas the story element, I thought the actual part of that ending, was a great place to end. The the line was great. It was just, I felt like they probably were like, maybe they tried it not showing her face, and like, no, we have to have her talk to the audience.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, and it almost felt like she was breaking the fourth wall a little bit there.
It was just strange. We weren't quite there yet. ILM did amazing work in this movie, and K2SO as a digital character is amazing.
He looked like a practical effect. He looked like a puppet.
But what they were trying to do, especially with Tarkin on screen so much, of recreating a dead person, frankly, it just
Well, we'll see in the special edition that we get in 2 years.
I did think I'm like, eventually maybe they need to clean that up a little.
So the next part I want to get to is something we kind of skipped over a little earlier. Let's get to it now. I want to talk about the Easter eggs and the inclusion of characters from Star Wars Rebels. What did you think about their inclusion in the film?
I thought it was cool because, for those that don't know, maybe aren't watching it, Star Wars Rebels takes place between Episode 3 and Episode 4. It's actually right before...
when the show began, it was 5 years before. I don't know how much time has passed for the characters, but it was like 5 years before A New Hope.
It's a couple years before now Rogue One. And we saw their ship, the Ghost, in the hangar and in the final battle. We heard paging for General Syndulla, which is Captain Hera, who obviously gets a promotion. And we also see Chopper. I love this show. I know all the characters' names.
Which I'm going to have to rewatch just to look for that scene.
And Eric, you can identify where we see him.
He's when the guy runs out to tell Mon Mothma, like, the fighting's begun on Scarif or something, whatever he tells her that basically makes them decide we're going to go help them. When the guy runs outside to Mon Mothma, you see Chopper, he's kind of onto the left of the screen, and you hear him making his little buzzing, squawking noises.
His grumpy honking noises.
Crankiest R2 ever.
Yes. I loved those inclusions, and again, it's that thing where, look, most people going to see Rogue One don't watch Star Wars Rebels, and there could be a different version of this movie, I suppose, where like Hera is like standing around that table or whatever, but I felt like there
weren't a lot of aliens at that table.
There weren't a lot of aliens.
Aside for the Kalmar.
Yeah, but I think they played it right because also they had to do a fine line there because this is after the events that we're watching on Rebels. So they could have had references or even shown every character, I suppose, but that would also reveal that everyone's alive. So all we know is Hera and Chopper.
They made it.
They made it, and that leaves everyone else's fate sort of out there. But it was cool.
And they're not married to a film representation of these characters.
Right.
You don't get this thing where like, oh, we have one guy playing Thanos in another movie, and then we got Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
It's like they can do whatever they want.
But it also helps even more sort of solidify, this whole idea of canon, and there'll always be people who are like, look, you may tell me those books and cartoons are canon, but to me it's just these movies. I'm like, okay, Hera and Chopper, they're in the movies
officially
now.
canon.
Like Hera at least has a character off screen and Chopper physically on screen. So it is kind of cool as someone who likes Star Wars Rebels quite a bit to like have that sort of it blend over into that world.
And it's sort of like props to the story group, right? They really
Pablo
did think about this, and how they were gonna like string everything together and make it all match up. And this is a benefit of that. And it really it's what it is. It's rewarding, kind of like more in-depth Star Wars fans, right? People who want to consume all the media and the books and the comic books and the TV shows get something extra out of it, and it's sort of like it's like a thank you and like a here you go or something special just for you. And I really like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, we got a Rebels character and we got a Clone Wars character, which is pretty amazing.
And of course, then I wonder a couple years from now, might we get the Rebels episode set during this? Which could very much happen. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, like, here's what they were doing in the background.
Oh, wow, that would be so cool. I would love to have just almost like an event episode of Rebels. Wouldn't that be great for like the season finale of Rebels if they go out in like a 90-minute just... What were they doing during Rogue One episode?
And by the way, I think I told Filoni this because I saw him at the premiere.
Dave Filoni.
Dave Filoni does Rebels, but I was like, hey, wait a second. Lars Mikkelsen, if I'm saying the name correctly, Mads Mikkelsen's brother voices Thrawn on Rebels. So I'm like, hey, it totally would work to have Galen and Thrawn meet. The time period works, and then you can have the Mikkelsen brothers.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get a Saw Gerrera action figure. I'm just putting that out.
There you go.
Lucasfilm people. Let's jump to another element. There are multiple elements of the Star Wars universe. One of those being anything from the characters to the settings. This film, we had a ton of planets, which was actually, I don't think since Revenge of the Sith we've seen this many planets in one Star Wars film. Another character of the Star Wars films is the music. What did you think about the first non-John Williams scored Star Wars film?
I thought it was a really strong score, though it did lack like a great new iconic theme. Like Rey's theme from Force Awakens, I think was that this is your like very hummable, theme. So it's a great score, and I do think it does a very good job of mostly being an original score while weaving into cues. Obviously the Imperial March, but even more importantly, I thought was the Death Star, that da 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 da, because the Imperial March isn't in Star Wars, but that you keep hearing that theme when you see the Death Star. So I really like that, and I think the score also sort of underplaying works very well for the kind of war movie this is, and it's just kind of an intense vibe to it. But I did wish there was kind of that one, like, here is a rousing, memorable theme, because almost every Star Wars movie, it's like, Duel of the Fates, even the love theme from Attack of the Clones,
Which
guys.
is great. No, that's a great song.
Battle of the Heroes, there's like
or
that
the Han
one.
and Leia theme from Empire Strikes
Right,
Back.
there's like, here's that one new, like, great theme, and Rey's theme was that for Force Awakens, and I didn't quite get it here, but it's still a very strong score.
What about you, Justin?
I agree with pretty much everything Eric just said. I will say, like, what I really enjoyed about the movie was that it did have this great tone, and it knew what kind of movie it wanted to be. And I think in that kind of movie, when you have this war kind of movie, you don't put hummable themes into it, because it's what we kind of expect from Star Wars. But this being an anthology, Star Wars story film, I feel like it also made sense to do something different and maybe don't give us that. It reminds me of, I think it was Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer said that, well, why isn't this new Batman theme for these Batman movies? Why isn't there something recognizable? It's because we didn't want you to go humming it like no 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 Batman. Like, we didn't want that. Like, so I feel like that makes sense for this movie to not give us that. I don't know. Maybe they didn't do that on purpose. Maybe they did.
The score was also done extremely quickly.
It was done in 4 weeks.
We should give. He's a great composer, and the fact that he did the
Amazing
score last minute is kind of phenomenal.
Michael Giacchino of Lost fame and Star Trek and Doctor Strange.
Incredibles.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
a
Up.
lot.
It had a similar texture to Bear McCreary's work on Battlestar Galactica, I thought, where it was in the background, it wasn't in your face, but it added to the scenes in the background way where it didn't take you out, but you noticed it, you knew it was there, and it definitely enhanced the scenes.
Yeah.
Let's jump to one last thing, and Joshua, I want to start with you on this one. Where would you rank Rogue One among the Star Wars films?
Gosh. Well, just to recap, I didn't love this movie, but I thought it was very confident in what it wanted to be, whether it succeeded in all areas. The weakest part for me being the characters and sort of the kind of clunky plotting here and there. But by the time you get to the third act, it's just like this glorious kind of what you've always wanted to see from a Star Wars movie. And Eric, I think you mentioned this in your review, is that you get why. George Lucas said he liked it, or so we've heard from Gareth Edwards, the director, and you could see why, because this is using full modern technology just to do a Star War film. And for that, it was just that even though I didn't love everything, kind of like how I felt about Godzilla, it's just kind of, it wasn't really there for
Godzilla had the opposite problem. Godzilla did have a really strong third act.
No, that's the thing. It's just that leading up to it, I wasn't really into Godzilla at all. But then that third act did make it worth sitting through all of it. Not that it was like torturous sitting through the Rogue One. I just think it wasn't quite there.
It outperformed the first two.
Yeah, but just that third act is so good, and then like all the fan service and Darth Vader and everything. So for having said all that, I think the prequels are in the back. Then comes in Rogue One for me. I didn't like it as much as I think I like Force Awakens a little more because I really love those characters. And then I would put the original trilogy up front. So that's how it works for me.
Yeah, I can't really decide on my like definitive ranking yet of Rogue One, except to say I loved it. And I will say that as someone who is probably more like finds the things to like about the prequels more than some, while also thinking they're heavily flawed movies. But I've also been like, but Revenge of the Sith, I really like Revenge of the Sith, but I think Rogue One blows Revenge of the Sith out of the water easily. I'm not sure about Force Awakens versus Rogue One, and I think that's one thing where I need a little more time because I love them both. I think that for different reasons, they both sort of touched upon things that are great about Star Wars, but in Force Awakens, of course, was leaning way into by the end of the movie with Rey, pulling the lightsaber to herself. It's like all that sort of chosen one, destiny, hero,
New Hope stuff.
Yeah, sort of new Jedi hero thing where this is the war. And that's what makes Rogue One really cool to me and does make me excited for more Star Wars stories, is that we can go in these different directions. So, like, Rogue One, when I say it's solidly in the middle for me, I mean that in a very positive way because I, love the movie so much. But yeah, original trilogy is its own thing. I'd have to think about Force Awakens versus this, except to say that they both make me very excited about the Disney era of Star Wars. Like, I think that they both show that it's it's in good hands, and I think in different ways those movies accomplish what they're setting out to do. So I'm giving a non-answer. That was my long non-answer.
That was a crafty dodge.
To say that it's around fourth or fifth. But
I will agree, though. It is super hard to compare Rogue One to Force Awakens because they are completely, wildly different movies.
Stylistically different movies and tonally different movies.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I put the prequels in a kind of different place. There's things, like I said, they're flawed. The things that I liked about Force Awakens, the prequel trilogy, were the plotting and showing how George Lucas always wanted to tell the story about how a republic turns into a fascist empire. So I thought that he did those parts really well. I had problems with the execution. I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. Like you, I really connected with those characters.
Yeah.
I thought that those were characters that you immediately understood. You liked them. They had a lot of chemistry between each other.
And they were more level, I will say for sure.
They were more fleshed out.
Even though I defended the characters more in Rogue One than you, I still say, Force Awakens does win on the who are you really invested in, quickly.
Although this film had a lot of heavy lifting to do.
Yeah.
It had to present itself within coming right before A New Hope. It had to introduce far more characters and new characters at one time, and new characters that were all integral parts to the story. So I felt like I understood why they may have glossed over some of the character building episodes to character building moments to get to the end. I still really enjoyed this movie. I felt like I've always wondered, before the prequels, what would it look like when somebody takes the Star Wars IP and makes their own version? Or I always thought, well, what if after 100 years the copyright goes out and somebody else gets to make their Star Wars movie like they do with things like the Wizard of Oz or these other IP? And I wondered what it would look like. This Rogue One is exactly that. Rogue One says, we're going to take a director, you do what you want with the Star Wars universe. Yeah. You can even have your own characters. And I thought it was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I expected. I put it after Empire. Just saying. That's me.
Wait.
Is Empire your number one?
No, Empire's, I go A New Hope,
Okay.
Empire, Rogue One, Force Awakens, then Jedi. Because Jedi I have problems with. Jedi, there's certain parts of the movie that I really, really love, which are pretty much the Luke and Vader scenes, and there's certain parts of the movie I can take it or leave it. And then I come to the prequels. The prequels, I'm not a fan of the Phantom Menace in most parts. The Clone Wars, I like a lot of the
Clones.
Attack of the Clones, I should say. I like all the stuff on Camino. That was my favorite part of the film. The third act.
I like Detective Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I like Detective Obi-Wan. I liked all the stuff with Django and Boba Fett. The third act is a hot mess. Revenge of the Sith, there's parts of it I like and there's parts of it I don't like. It's strong and weak in weird ways to me. It's also one that I find myself not watching often. So I put Rogue One actually pretty high.
Wow. Third.
So for all things Rogue One and all things Star Wars, come back to IGN. Thank you.